Hi, everybody. My name is Emilie Baltz, and I am thrilled to be back here with all of you again this year, a little post-pandemic maybe. And I have a new project to share with you that specifically addresses this topic through the lens of embodied futures and how, with this idea of how we might imagine futures that are beyond screens, beyond buttons, how a spa for the senses came out of this. So I hope the title has you intrigued enough. For those of you who haven't heard about me before, I am a French American experiential artist, and I focus on creating multisensory work that reconnects both self and society to the wonder of human experience. Over the last 15 years, I've developed a unique specialty also in food and experience design. And I really believe that using food as a medium and a metaphor for designing experience can lead us into a better understanding of how all of our senses work together to craft perception and to create meaning in the world. This project that I want to share with you today just opened this February, and it is a spa for the senses, and it is set in the Museum of the Future in Dubai. And for me, it really is a moment where I think my own work was able to take not only a larger form, but also there's a clearer direction around how our senses can work together to tell new stories and specifically set the stage for a different kind of speculative future than we might traditionally have seen in the world. As I said, my work itself often deals with a lot of food and technology, as you see here. I do a lot of interactive exhibition design work. I've invented things like the cotton candy theremin. I have hosted radio shows, designed cafes and restaurants and bars. I also teach, and within that lens, I really like to explore future scenarios through the lens of making an experience. Now, all that said, I think this is a scene that is not me, but it's something that I think all of us experience, perhaps in our daily lives, but most specifically over the last 2 years, coming through this global pandemic, where we really have become almost one with our technology. And that being said, it has facilitated so many incredible conversations and relationships all over the world, but also created a lot of isolation, a lot of strife, a lot of disembodiment. And as I sat through these last 2 years and experienced my own challenges going through that, I had the privilege of working on this project that addressed the antidote to this. How could our technology facilitate a better, more human experience rather than driving us into the screen further and further and maybe isolating us away from each other further and further? One of the main questions that this project asks, as well as this is one of the questions I ask myself all the time in my own practice, is how can we create experiences that allow us to reconnect to ourselves and to each other? And interestingly enough, more than 2 years ago, I got an email that had this very question in it, and it was a creative brief from the creative director at the Museum of the Future in Dubai, Brendan McGettrick, who asked me to pitch on the third floor of the Museum of the Future that was specifically focused around the human body and how technology could inspire new connections to the human body and to our society at large. One of the tenets that I brought to that was my real belief, and as you've seen, scrolling through my website there, the real belief in how our human senses can bond us as humans. Dinner parties are a great example of that. Not only do they stimulate all of our senses, but the ritual and the act of dining bonds us together also in social experience and also becomes the setting for the stories of our lives, since it's something that we enact on a daily basis. So using that as metaphor and thinking through how could our senses also provide new ways to take in experience as information. especially in the light of all of the convenience and the adaptability of the digital. Technology permeates every corner of our life almost. But what can we do also to make sure that the future that we're creating at a speed more rapid than ever before, um, doesn't take us down a dystopian route? Try as we might, let's see what other stories we can tell. So, this story that I'm going to tell you today specifically focuses on how we might engage the human senses through technology and provide physical experiences that remind us of the power, the beauty, and the infinite richness of our bodies. And the premise here is that change actually has to come from within. And you'll see how that gets deconstructed through this project in the next few slides. And I'll be honest that I'm on my own road with that right now as well. And eager to see not only how this world develops, but how all of our individual lives also start to develop as we come out of this, let's call it a semi-post COVID moment. And in some ways, have to learn what other stories we might be able to tell ourselves and what other experiences we might want to create in the world to foster this kind of reconnection, return to ourselves, and return to our bodies. So this project is set, as I said, in the Museum of the Future in Dubai. I don't know if you've caught a glimpse of it over these last few years, but it really is. It's an incredible icon. We've never seen a building like this. It was designed to be a beacon of hope and launched by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum to really elevate Dubai's role to help humanity overcome its greatest challenges and create a vision for a brighter, more sustainable future. In the museum, which is located in that larger side of the ellipse, you go through 3 immersive floors that take you on a journey of humanity, from space travel into an institute for climate change, and then down to the 3rd floor where the spa for the senses is located, that grounds us in the human body. And each of these floors is a speculative future, asks us to not just imagine what comes ahead, but also experience it. And how will technology play a role in telling new stories that inspire hope for the future of humanity? The building itself, as said, is just an icon for the age. And when we talk about all change comes from within, I wanted to show you just a quick glimpse into the museum lobby itself. I had nothing to do with any of the design of this, but it is really, a modern marvel and an incredible feat of architecture and design. So flock there if you can. On level 3 of this museum, so you enter through that lobby and then you take an elevator, a media lift all the way up that simulates like a space flight. You end up on a space floor, and then you go into an institute for climate change, and then you end the immersive journey on the 3rd floor, which is titled Al Waha. And this is, as I said, a spa for the senses. Now, Al Waha is a cluster of these interdependent but also interconnected futuristic spa treatment rooms. The idea was to create an experience that was somewhat familiar, and especially in the Middle East, spas and self-care and well-being are so prized that the spa would be a familiar experiential typology that we could engage guests in, something known, and then how we design the treatments therein would be the completely new point of entry into this future world. Now, the spa itself, as is the whole museum, is actually set in the future world in 2071. And it really welcomes guests into this environment that's designed to reconnect humanity to its body and also to its spirit through this series of interactive experiences that are each designed as treatments, and their function is also to serve as an antidote to the potentially destructive habits of our future digital lives. Now, as I said, I developed the initial concept and did the creative direction throughout the entire project under the purview of Brendan McGettrick, the curator and museum creative director, along with just an incredible cast of partners who helped bring this immersive story to life. Sound design by Polytope Agency, located in Los Angeles. Each of the experiences is scented, and unfortunately, I can't share the smells with you through the screen. But please do look up Centronics. They're located in the Netherlands, and we're an amazing scent design partner. And then Atelier Bruckner had the huge job of doing all the general planning for the exhibition, all of the scenography, the graphic, and the media design. So you'll see a lot of their work pictured in here too, alongside Deep Local, a studio in Pittsburgh in the United States who did all of the technology program and tangible product design for the interactives within the spa. Clear Story, also an American Pittsburgh-based company, did the interactive lighting design, and the wonderful artist Alex Guevara did the generative visual design and programming for one of the experiences. There are many more here, and I wish I could list all of them. It's important to me that we also understand that projects of this scale are made of many. And so today I share with you a very brief story around something that is the collective work of so many incredible minds. So when first I was given this brief, how can we reconnect to our bodies in the light of a rapidly evolving digital future? What might that mean? In my work, I always try to look backwards before I look forward. So I started doing some research in how we have used embodied experience to create spaces of care, of intimacy, of wellness, of reconnection, of education. And these 6 different categories really resonated from Roman gymnasiums, which were places of original learning, workout. They demanded effort, to tantric modalities, where the experience of engaging with a body and the relational experience therein can create a new kind of intimacy. Modern dance, myself, I actually come from a background in contemporary dance, so it's always had a lot of meaning for me in terms of how we tell stories through our bodies in time, space, and effort using movement. I'm also the child of a Montessori educator. My mother was a Montessori teacher. And if you're not familiar with this pedagogy, the the lens onto education is to learn through sensory interactions. So how can our bodies also be tools for accumulating knowledge, but also integrating knowledge through action and through experience? And this, I think, cuts and pastes very neatly onto contemporary neuroscience, where we start to understand too the power of how our body connects to our brain and how that can quite literally rewire over and over again new neural pathways. And that's done actually in a wonderful example, snow salon rooms, which are rehabilitation spaces where sensory interactions from tactile interactions, haptic feedback, lighting is all used to rehabilitate individuals with disabilities, sometimes autism, Parkinson's disease, spaces where we need to rekindle a sense of, presence and attention. So all of these come together, or some of the research, because they all really start to use the body in different but similar ways to tell new stories. And those new stories are not only imaginative places, but they also have real direct consequences onto individual human lives. Alongside that, I started to think about, what might a space like this look and feel like? Here are some of the original mood board imagery. These are all images gathered from the internet. Some of you probably have seen them around the world. But this idea of looking through the lens of really simple geometries, timeless forms, and a palette of colors that really reference, the spectrum of human skin from very pale pinks to light browns, but also could reference the desert, the cultural context of the Museum of the Future in the United Arab Emirates. So this was some of the original inspiration. You'll see a bit how that came to life, alongside very timeless architecture, from the Granada Arch to Roman baths to hammams. How had this kind of visual language, it always existed and shown up in spaces of community, spaces of care also, like we would see in a hammam or a bath, and also have a certain kind of timeless sacredness to them. We've seen them in religious settings, spiritual settings. So this kind of architecture and form language also seemed to resonate in terms of inscribing the spa with some kind of timeless quality that spoke of all of these intentions that we wanted guests to experience. Now, my own process through this, I wanted to share this with you a little bit because it might deviate from the classic design process that you saw before, look and feel, was also through the lens of experience. So something that I use a lot in my own practice is my dance background. And something I do personally, and you'll also see that I do collectively, is through the lens of movement and our human bodies. How could we start to bring shape to some of these experiences that needed to deliver on these big keywords? We wanted to create new awareness in our guests, some kind of transformation or realization. We wanted to create a space that could restore them from the trials of digital futures, that would allow a sense of release, that would create a sense of rejuvenation. They could also be a space for revitalizing them. So in my studio, I hosted a series of workshops with dancers. These are several members of Third Rail Company located in Brooklyn, along with one of my assistants and collaborators, Berk Ilhan. And we went through a series of prompts in these workshops that explored how our bodies might be able to express these themes of rejuvenation, of awareness, transformation, connection came into there. And simply by moving through these different words, we then started to sketch them into potential experiences, things that might be able to be the seeds for, the spa treatments that would come to life. So to give you a little peek into that process, all of this first literally did come from within, from starting from a seed that would generate a movement that could create a relationship, a new posture, a new way of moving through space or with each other, all with the intention of always delivering on these emotional tenets that we had given ourselves as the mission. The approach that came out of that was a bit of like the marketing pitch for the spa itself. Uh, but a lot of the things that came out of this in terms of movement were also inspired by the healing mind body practices in the Arab world. And we knew that this wanted to be set, it's set in 2071, so it had to also be powered by cutting edge technology and grounded in proven science. So these treatments, to be an immersive reality that people would, experience and step into, needed to deliver on all of these tenets. And in doing so, they would inspire a completely new relationship to our senses and positively reconnect guests to their own bodies, as well as to each other and to a sense of something greater than themselves, perhaps the planet, the soul. And I think the big piece here was that by moving through this, by iterating through this, by having a lot of conversation and dialogue, the approach here was to present a spa, let's call it also a space for wellness, that looked beyond the individual and instead imagined a future of well-being as an ecology, physical, social, and spiritual. And right now, when we think of the spa, when we think of wellness practices, I think in the Western world, we're often thinking through a very individualistic lens. And we're often treating the body as a machine for efficiency, for delivery. And instead, how could we start to think of a new world where we are treating, yes, our bodies with care, but that our health also depends on the health of our relationships to each other, to a sense of a greater whole. And so that is the speculative future that the spa approaches and introduces that through a series of different experiences. So this is a floor plan. As you can see, the museum is an ellipse, so you have this kind of elliptical hemisphere that you walk around. You start in an antechamber that's a general welcome, move into a lobby that's a welcome space that has a short ritual, and you'll see an image of that soon. And then you flow through a series of alcoves that hold the exposition, the storytelling for the spa in sort of a three-step process. You go around a little bend into the transition hall and then go into the main hall, which, as you see here, is a hemisphere. And the central part of that is a bath, And you'll see the interpretation of what that means. But again, inspired by these original spaces of wellness and care, the hammam, the Roman bath, where there was always a central bath flanked by a series of rooms. And so we take that same inspiration, and guests have an open ended journey throughout this place, exploring, playing, feeling, touching, smelling. And then they exit through something called the Temple of Transcendence by Jason Bruges Studio, which I urge you to find out in the world because it is really a true thing of beauty. So the treatments that we developed were based within this idea of an ecology of well-being. And the treatments were each designed to treat self, society, and spirit, and how all of those could work together in concert. And those flank this main feature, which, as I said, is the central bath. And that central bath is called the movement therapy, shorthand move. And that takes as premise that our bodies are really in need of restoration in the future, that we might be sitting more, we might not move. Um, and we need places where we can fully express ourselves, focus, where we rejuvenate through movement. And so it takes curative properties of walking meditations, flowing water therapy, and brings that to life through novel technology. The feeling treatment is a treatment for an individual, and that presents an ability to restore sensitivity and feeling to the hand and the mind. The connection treatment counteracts the really alienating effects of technology, just on the heels of the isolation that we experienced through COVID and speculating that this will potentially get worse in the future. How might we create new treatments, new rituals where we can experience togetherness and connection? And then finally, the grounding treatment, which looks at the electromagnetic field that will rise. So this is a little bit more of a scientific approach, but expressed in a poetic way. But the premise here is that as our digital futures develop, so too will all of the electromagnetic field. And so as human beings, we need a grounding vibration to be able to be present in our bodies, to reconnect to the earth. And this treatment addresses just that. Now, the interesting part of the name here, and I was so lucky to work with exceptional colleagues fluent both in Arabic and English, as we were thinking through the name and the idea of what this spa not only symbolized, but also how it connected to the surrounding culture. This word al-Waha came up, which means oasis in Arabic. And the idea here is that the oasis here is the oasis from the rigors in the future of of the digital life. And this journey begins, as I said, on the third floor. Guests enter and they see the name and then the logo, which is this beautiful flower shape borrowed from the Dubai flower itself, over a main archway, and walk into, as you remember from that floor plan, they walk into the lobby, which is a welcoming space, and encounter a cleansing vapor fountain. And then from there, they follow on down the hall to engage in a three-step welcome process that's hosted by an avatar, which is kind of your host throughout the museum journey, named Aya. So as we approach this, you can see that you enter into, again, these timeless geometries that are based on uh, simple archways, and the walls themselves are covered in this gradient of human skin color tones from light to dark, and covered in a very soft, tactile clay work. So there is a sense of tactility, there's a sense of implied softness. There's a beautiful sound design that you'll hear in a short moment. Um, but what this fountain is you'll see it in action, but it is the first moment of grace and of welcome and hospitality. Now, here's a quick overview of all the different experiences in the spa. So you saw there, and you'll see it again. You saw here an entrance into the main lobby. And as I said, that this is what greets guests with a cleansing vapor fountain. Now, there was a specific choice here to scent that fountain with not the traditional, I would say, Western definitions of spa, like eucalyptus, clean feelings, right? Or even anything that would be remotely spiritual, like a frankincense or a myrrh. Um, but instead, Centronics brought this incredible idea to the table that what if it was really a gesture of hospitality, a moment of welcome? And what if we borrowed from food-based rituals within this part of the world, where, for example, you are offered a small tea upon arrival? And those scents, cardamom, saffron, chai, that really create this atmosphere of hospitality and warmth were infused into this vapor fountain. And from there, move along down through the alcove space to learn more. So Karak tea was actually the original inspiration for the cleansing vapor scent. And as you see, you approach this fountain and there's a low-hanging cloud of fog, and you're invited to rinse your hands in it. And within that, the olfactory experience really envelops you. The fog itself is like very delicate and very soft. You can kind of blow it up with your hand. And there's a real sense of a caress, a moment, again, this idea of creating care. Here we're engaging the sense of touch and the olfactory experience to, upon first entry, this is the threshold of the experience, have these sensory touch points that are like a very gentle welcome. And again, a warm welcome. So they set the stage for the treatments to come. As we said, guests walk through these alcoves, and within these spaces, they're asked to put their telephones away. This is intended to be a digital free zone. And at each step along the process, they are led by Aya, who is the host within the museum going experience, who's explaining step by step what the different treatments are going to be, as well as how they should put their telephones away. Now we've moved through a lot of the museum already, and we enter into the first installation, the central feature, the bath in the middle of the space. And I have always been quite inspired, as I said, by modern dance, and I specifically trained in a style of modern dance called Martha Graham. And Martha Graham was not only an incredible choreographer, but in my opinion, also a beautiful philosopher. And one of the things that has always stayed with me is a line that she said, that movement never lies. It is a barometer of telling the state of the soul's weather to all who can read it. And through that lens, as well as this idea that as our digital futures develop, our movement actually is becoming more and more reduced as our sedentary state evolves. How could we create, as the main element within this spa, a central feature that would facilitate movement? And I spoke to that earlier, that this really is a space that is meant to be a collective space. As you see here, the treatment rooms flank around it. What you're looking at actually is a mirror wall. So this is the interactive space, is the floor that has these kind of dunes that are projected generative visuals projected on top of a double padded cream carpet. So when you walk into this space from the alcoves, this is what you encounter. And there's a large mirror against that that creates a sense of infinity. And as you step onto it, the colors change from dawn to dusk, kind of suggesting very abstractly that there is a certain passage of time here. And that choice is made directly from the idea that these visuals reference not only water, but also sand. The sound design within this space is a particle system that is almost like a very soft white noise. And so as you step onto this carpet, you're just embedded suddenly in softness. The visuals themselves respond to your movement. And you're also immersed within this beautiful sonic field that again has a sense of bathing in sound and in particles with an incredible softness. Being able to see yourself move also fosters, greater discovery, greater play, a bit of performance. And the unique thing about how these visuals were created, which was in collaboration with Polytope as the sound designer, Deep Local as a technological partner and Alex Guevara, who did all the visual design here, was one of the choices that we made was that the visuals would actually respond more to slower movement. So it would reward slowness in this space. So as people move around, the floor moves with them. Again, this kind of ocean of sand surrounded by this ocean of air, and responds to the movements throughout the space. So it allows people to move together, but also invites them to move slowly. So a moment of pause, of grounding, of rest is encouraged. This is a view from actually when we were installing in February in Dubai. So you can see some of this firsthand. So you'll see here how the infinity effect works with the mirror. And then as we move around, this is the wonderful Jake from Deep Local who's testing the visuals and my own feet. um, you'll see how your footsteps respond, how the visuals respond to the feet. And this was an early prototype. Not, no, I'm sorry, not an early prototype. This was an early test. So the tracking has evolved a little bit since then. But you'll get a sense that your movements affect the movement of the particle system around you and set the stage for this really beautiful meditative walking, as well as a space for movement, play, and exchange. Now, flanking the central bath, as I said, are three different treatment rooms. The one that you first encounter as you walk in, where you to take the flanking corridor, is the field treatment. And that is directly influenced by one of my own tenants, again, um, borrowed from my own educational background, influenced by Montessori, that the hand is the instrument of the mind. And as we think about, again, in the context of the human body and rapidly evolving digital futures, what might become of our hands as we click, as we swipe, as we text, as we stare? And if the hand truly is to be the instrument of the mind, how might we start to think about it as a tool for redeveloping a new connection to the world around us? We have very, very flat experiences with it now through most of our technology. Um, and as we were working in workshop with the dancers, one of the movements that I wanted to pull here was this idea also of how we can care for each other, what it means to engage beyond a handshake, for example. I don't know if you've ever had, for example, a hand massage, but it can be a very restorative experience, but it also is a very socially acceptable way of connecting in most cultures. Our hands become handshakes, moments of introduction, as well as the part of our body that creates communication digitally. So through that lens, um, I started to think of this idea of creating something that could restore sensitivity to a hand. Again, if we could restore sensitivity and mobility to the hand, presence in the hand, could we also restore presence, sensitivity, almost a sense of empathy in the mind? And as it says here, in the context of digital technology, all of our clicking, our typing, our swiping really reduces that feeling in our digits and might actually also decrease the regions of the brain involved in those elements of sensitivity, awareness, empathy, other self-processing. So in this treatment, we're using ultra haptics technology, which is the first midair tactile uh, interface. It's often now being proposed as the future of touchless screens, where you have ultrasonic vibrations that meet midair and can create an illusion of a shape under your hands. So you can feel something but not see it. Um, and using that, we created a tactile meditation. I might even call it a tactile poem that aims to redevelop human sensitivity by guiding guests through feeling very subtle, invisible sensations under their hands. The treatment is experienced in a booth as an individual experience. You sit down and you're greeted by an audio meditation that comes in from each side of you and are asked to place your hands over the basin, and focus to notice the different sensations under your hands. So it looks something like this. Unfortunately, I can't show you what the ultrasonic meditation is because it is invisible. But you can imagine that as you hold your hands over here, you're focused, the lights go down, and you're asked to really focus on the different sensations, the different kinds of tactility that are happening under your hand. And it lasts for about 2 minutes. So it's a large ask. We've discovered that it actually is one of the most anticipated and and experienced interactions in the museum, which is interesting because it is also the one that asks us to be the stillest, to be the calmest, to really focus on an experience of sensitivity. Now, counter to that, on a much larger scale, when we talked earlier about how our digital futures start to rise and develop and what that might mean for our greater, not just global, but urban context, the electromagnetic field is raising, at speeds beyond belief. Um, and how do we start to change minds around that? How do we start to create a sense of grounding and almost a sense also of urgency that this is something that we want to be able to address in the future? And Jane Goodall once said, if you want somebody to change their mind, you've first got to reach the heart. So this treatment is based around these two premises that, again, as the built environment develops with more digital integration in the future, so does the electromagnetic field increase, and that ultimately raises stress levels. And so this ground therapy aims to restore the human body's elemental vibrations. Let's bring us back down to earth, bring us back into our bodies, and invites guests to stand between two large-scale gongs that are invisibly excited through healing subfrequencies, so very low bass frequencies, that are focused at the human heart. And as you stand between them, these two large gongs vibrate very close to the heart chakra. They're promoting not only grounding, but also a recentering of the most human, I might say, of our chakras, the heart. So it looks somewhat like this. Here are these two large-scale gongs. Nothing actually ever hits these gongs. There are subwoofers that are placed right behind them, and they shoot out a subfrequency that starts to slowly vibrate the gong until it gets very excited and creates these large, large bass tone vibrations. And as you see here, they're aimed directly at the human heart. So from the front and the back, the sonic vibrations really aim to rebalance the center of your body and start to reground you, as well as create a really healing meditative experience that is also just a very profound sound bath. Now, the last treatment that I want to share with you here speaks more to the context of society at large. The other ones was a focus on self, the spirit, how do we reconnect to not only a sense of self in our world, but through this lens, the idea of creating new experiences, new rituals that can foster a sense of belonging to each other. And if that happens, could that also be an inroad to creating more peace in this place we call Earth? So the Connect therapy is designed to counteract the alienating effects of technology, and again, this is something that I think we feel very palpably post-COVID. But what are the new rituals that we might be able to design where we can experience togetherness and connection? And so this therapy is specifically designed to relieve feelings of loneliness, feelings of alienation, by channeling the healing properties of our collective voice. So what that means is that guests are invited to sit down to hum, and their hum is captured by embedded microphones, and use their voices to trigger a generative starscape that when we all have arrived to a certain destination, which you'll see shortly, it unlocks the healing energy of togetherness through an immersive choreography of sound, of light, and of smell. So the experience looks somewhat like this elliptical table that has 6 seats around it. Each is a different station that you go up to and you're asked to hum. And as you hum, Your humming moves a star path towards the central levitating object. Um, and if we all reach the center together with our humming, we create a small constellation and are able to unlock a sound, light, and scent show that actually comes through the railing that inspires a sense of togetherness. Now, I have a short video to share with you. And again, this video that I'll share with you next is actually from a prototype of it. So you'd never see the sculptural object floating on the center. Um, but the notion here, I think you can still start to understand it. And so this will show you how the star fields move to the center, connect, and then release the experience of togetherness. So what you see there is an early sketch of what would actually become now a central gemstone that levitates above. So this has actually evolved since we photographed it, which is really wonderful. But what you could see there is that we have a constellation that then has a beautiful little explosion. You might have heard it too, a psh, and that's scent coming out. So you're really filled and immersed within this starscape that ends with the human heart beating. Now, all of this put together, and I thank you for coming along this ride with me. This is actually the first time I've presented it, so thank you for bearing with me as I start to describe this. But one of the hopes that I have for this kind of work is that we start to think somewhat differently about our futures and about what it means to be a human, in time and space for sure, but also in our bodies and with each other. And this line by Goethe was always of inspiration to me throughout this process, that the world is so empty. And if one thinks only of mountains, rivers, and cities, but to know someone here and there who thinks and feels with us, and though distant, is close to us in spirit, this makes the earth for us an inhabited garden. And that is my wish with this work, is that we start to change the lens from an individual lens of care to this sense of ecology. That yes, by taking care of ourselves, we are also taking care of each other, of a greater sense of us as not just a community, but as a planet. And I also am very thrilled that this project comes to life, because in terms of a vision for the future, rare is it that we see visions of the future that are about rejuvenation, that are about stillness, that are about sensitivity. And I'm incredibly grateful and very proud to have been able to work with this incredible team to bring that to life. Because I do believe that if we are to change anything in the future, it must come from within. And these ambiguous experiences of emotions that make us so deeply human, but also really connect us to each other and to ourselves. How can we start to celebrate that and transform them? And again, reconnect to ourselves and to each other, and hopefully reconnect and even invent perhaps a new vision for the future that is beyond productivity, that is beyond speed, that is beyond, we might say, even the traditional masculine definitions that we've seen throughout time as the visions of our future, and come back to a place of care, come back to a place of softness, and mostly come back to our bodies. So thank you so much for having me today. I wish I could see all of your faces, but in lieu, have a wonderful morning.